Alexandra Eala is suing Nike for $500 million. And the tennis world completely shattered. Not rattled, not surprised, shattered. Because this isn't a young athlete throwing a legal tantrum over a lost check. This is a calculated, courageous declaration of war filed in black ink, signed with trembling fury, directed at the most recognizable swoosh on the planet. A corporation worth billions. An organization with tentacles reaching every locker room, every press conference, every sponsorship deal in professional women's tennis. And standing against all of that, one Filipino girl, 23 years old, racket in one hand, a $500 million lawsuit in the other. If you think you've seen controversy in tennis before, Serena's chair umpire meltdown, Sharapova's doping ban, Osaka's mental health walkout, understand this. What Alexandra Eala just ignited makes all of those moments feel like warm-up acts. This is the main event and it's only just begun. There are athletes who arrive quietly, build slowly, and earn recognition through years of grinding anonymity. Then there are those who arrive like lightning, sudden, blinding, impossible to look away from. Alexandra Eala arrived like lightning. Born in Manila, Philippines, raised with a racket almost before she could walk, Eala wasn't manufactured by a tennis academy system or groomed by wealthy parents chasing a dream. She was forged through discipline so fierce it bordered on obsession. Through losses that would have broken ordinary competitors. Through a cultural identity that made every victory feel like it belonged to an entire nation, not just a single player. By the time she was 16, coaches across Europe were whispering her name. By 17, she had claimed junior Grand Slam titles that most professionals never touch in their entire careers. The Roland Garros Juniors title didn't just announce her arrival. It announced a dominance that felt almost unsettling for someone so young. What separated Eala from every other hyped junior prospect wasn't just talent. It was presence. That rare, undefinable quality that makes cameras gravitate toward a player, that makes crowds hold their breath between points. That makes opponents feel the psychological weight of competition before the first serve even lands. Tennis analysts began drawing comparisons to legends. Filipino media erupted with pride that transcended sport. This was national identity crystallized into a backhand winner, a perfectly timed drop shot, a fist pump that felt like a cultural declaration. And Nike noticed, of course, Nike noticed. Corporations with $50 billion empires don't miss athletes like Eala. They're talent scouts, they're marketing departments, they're brand strategists. They identified her trajectory before most mainstream audiences had learned to pronounce her name correctly. They saw the social media engagement numbers climbing. They saw the demographic appeal. A young, articulate, deeply passionate athlete representing Southeast Asia, an emerging market Nike had been aggressively pursuing for years. The sponsorship deal wasn't charity. It wasn't goodwill. It was a calculated business investment in what Nike's internal projections reportedly classified as a generational brand asset. Think about what that phrase means. Generational, not seasonal, not promising, generational. They didn't sign Alexandra Eala because they believed in her potential. They signed her because their data told them she was going to be inevitable. And that's precisely what makes everything that followed so devastating and so suspicious. Because when corporations label someone inevitable, they don't walk away with extraordinary pressure from somewhere far more powerful than quarterly earnings reports. So ask yourself this: what force on earth could convince Nike to abandon a generational investment? Hold that question because the answer will disturb you. The day Alexandra Eala signed with Nike, the Philippines celebrated like a national holiday had been declared overnight. Social media erupted across every platform. Hashtags trended for 72 consecutive hours. Politicians congratulated her publicly. Children in Manila posted videos wearing handmade Nike logos on their shirts because they couldn't afford the real ones. But they wanted to belong to the moment anyway. That image alone, those handmade logos, said everything about what this partnership represented beyond tennis. This wasn't a sponsorship. This was a symbol. For Eala personally, the Nike deal represented validation at the highest imaginable commercial level. Athletes understand something deeply psychological about major brand partnerships. It confirms that the world's most powerful institutions see your future as worth betting enormous resources on. It quiets every internal doubt. Every 4 a.m. training session that questioned whether sacrifice would eventually yield recognition suddenly felt justified. Her equipment gleamed with the swoosh. Her tournament appearances carried Nike's visual identity across international broadcasts, reaching millions of households. She became a walking billboard not just for athletic wear, but for the idea that Southeast Asian women belonged at tennis's most elite levels. The partnership looked bulletproof, but behind closed doors, whispers began circulating almost immediately. Sources close to the situation, individuals who occupied significant positions within professional tennis's commercial ecosystem and who spoke only under conditions of strict anonymity, described an atmosphere of growing tension surrounding Eala's presence in the WTA's competitive landscape. Not tension born from performance issues, not concerns about professionalism or conduct. Something far more uncomfortable. Eala was winning consistently, increasingly at a pace that disrupted carefully constructed competitive narratives surrounding other players. Players with deeper establishment connections, longer histories within the WTA's political infrastructure, more strategically convenient brand stories for Western-facing marketing campaigns. In professional sports, inconvenient success creates enemies that polite conversation never acknowledges. The warning signs appeared gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. Nike's social media team, typically aggressive in promoting sponsored athletes following significant tournament results, began responding to Eala's victories with unusual silence. Posts were delayed. Celebration content that standard protocol demanded appeared either diminished or entirely absent. Internal communications that would normally celebrate a sponsored athlete's breakthrough performances reportedly went strangely quiet. One individual familiar with Nike's athlete relations department described the atmosphere during this period with a single word: uncomfortable. Then came celebrations of a risk. Expressed bewilderment that rapidly escalated into fury. The central question burning across every platform, every comment section, every tennis forum wasn't how the deal ended. It was why. Because the timing made absolutely no logical commercial sense. Eala's performance metrics weren't declining, they were accelerating. Her global visibility wasn't shrinking, it was expanding. Her demographic appeal across Southeast Asia represented exactly the market penetration Nike's Asian operations had invested years pursuing strategically. Canceling her partnership at this precise moment contradicted every rational business calculation Nike's executives supposedly applied to athlete investment decisions. Unless the decision wasn't rational, unless it wasn't purely commercial, unless someone had made a phone call. Tennis industry journalists began reporting fragments of an increasingly troubling narrative. Multiple sources from distinctly separate corners of professional tennis's commercial world independently described communications occurring between WTA-affiliated figures and Nike representatives during the weeks preceding the cancellation. The precise content of those alleged communications remained unconfirmed through official channels, but the pattern of testimony pointed unmistakably toward coordinated institutional pressure. EA's management team, upon learning these reports, reportedly experienced a specific emotional progression. Initial disbelief followed by recognition followed by something that transformed almost immediately into absolute, unwavering resolve. They began documenting everything, every communication, every timestamp, every contractual clause, every promise made and subsequently abandoned. Every instance where Nike's behavior contradicted with their signed agreement explicitly required. Because Eala wasn't going to disappear quietly into a footnote, she wasn't going to accept institutional erasure with the graceful silence that powerful organizations typically expect from athletes who lack the resources or courage to resist. She was building a case, and the tennis world had absolutely no idea what was coming. Here is where this story transforms from a corporate dispute into something that should genuinely terrify every young professional athlete currently competing anywhere in professional sport. The Women's Tennis Association was established with a founding philosophy rooted in advocacy, protecting female players from exactly the institutional exploitation and arbitrary power that had historically made professional sports so brutal for women navigating environments designed without their interests in mind. Billie Jean King's fingerprints are embedded in the WTA's DNA. The organization's entire public identity depends on presenting itself as a guardian of player welfare. So, how does an organization wearing that identity allegedly end up pressuring a global corporation to abandon one of women's tennis's brightest, most culturally significant emerging talents? The answer, according to multiple sources whose credibility and access to relevant decision-makers carries significant weight, involves internal WTA politics far more complicated and self-interested than the organization's public statements would ever acknowledge. Competitive ecosystems generate hierarchies. Those hierarchies develop beneficiaries, players, management groups, agents, and affiliated commercial entities whose financial interests depend on maintaining specific power structures. When an outsider ascends rapidly, particularly an outsider who doesn't originate from tennis's traditionally dominant cultural and geographic territories, those hierarchies feel threatened in ways that manifest through channels completely invisible to public observation. Eala wasn't just winning matches. She was disrupting sponsorship conversations. Her presence in marketing discussions reportedly redirected attention and commercial enthusiasm away from players whose management teams maintained longer, deeper relationships with both Nike executives and WTA commercial departments. The alleged pressure campaign reportedly operated through suggestion rather than explicit demand. The preferred methodology of institutional power because it creates plausible deniability while achieving identical outcomes. Conversations framed as expressing concerns about brand alignment. Questions raised about long-term strategic fit that contained no specific accusations but communicated unmistakable intent to individuals sophisticated enough to decode institutional language. Nike, despite its enormous independent commercial power, operates within professional tennis's ecosystem in ways that make WTA relationships genuinely consequential. Tournament access, official partnership designations, preferred positioning, and WTA-affiliated commercial opportunities. These represent real financial value that sophisticated brand managers weigh carefully against the perceived cost of defying institutional preferences. The calculation allegedly wasn't close, and EA paid the price for a political equation she had no knowledge of and no opportunity to